Hello everybody, it's Ginger on Wheels here again. Thanks for stopping by the channel. This is going to be a really great video. It's a full beans review on Voro Motors' latest electric scooter release, the EMOVE Cruiser all-wheel drive. This is Voro Motors' fourth iteration of this scooter model, and I still think the EMOVE Cruiser is one of the most exciting long-range scooters you can buy, not just right now, but for the last few years, just because it has so much bang for your buck. But this one's got a twist, dual motors, and actually quite a few other big-time upgrades. So let's get the intro rolling and get into it. Previous versions of the EMOVE Cruiser were 48 and 52 volts, but this thing is 60 volts, and it's still got that massive 30 amp hour LG battery, but it's also got the IPX6 water resistance rating. Honestly, you can tell this thing is meant to ride and go the distance. Plus, it's not just another rebranded scooter. This one's actually made and designed by Voro Motors in their own factory. They've been listening to user feedback for years and making tasteful upgrades on this thing, so we have got a lot to cover. Now, this isn't just a basic overview video. I went full Ginger on Wheels on this thing and really dissected it to dig deep into its highlights and quirks so you know exactly what you'll be getting inside and out before you buy it. If you do decide to grab an all-wheel drive cruiser after watching this video, I kindly ask that you use my affiliate code, Ginger7, when you're checking out on the Voro Motors website. That way, not only do you get the maximum discount, but you also support these types of honest reviews on my channel. And you and I have both got to know by now that honest reviews in this niche hobby are very hard to come by these days. But by using the Ginger7 code when you check out, it helps ensure that I get to keep making them here on this channel. Ow, hot. Well, the first thing you notice when you pull this EMOVE Cruiser all-wheel drive out of the box is how serious it feels. Everything is oversized for a scooter in this class, but in the best way. It's got really wide handlebars, a huge deck, and thick stem pole. It's just obvious that this scooter is made for real long cruises and not just the showroom floor. The build feels extremely tight, confidence-inspiring just right away. There's no stem wobble, no weird flexing, plus you'll notice upgrades over last year's single-motor EMOVE Cruiser. Truth be told though, I wasn't particularly excited about unboxing or reviewing this thing when I heard about it, just because I thought, okay, it's another EMOVE Cruiser, but this one's got an extra motor and costs $500 more. How am I honestly going to tell people that's worth buying? But what I didn't realize is that compared to last year's single motor Cruiser version 2, it's got much stiffer stock suspension, which is actually something that I felt like the single motor version needed so badly that I upgraded it myself. This one's also got fully hydraulic front and rear brakes with adjustable regenerative braking that will actually help you tack a few extra miles onto the end of the battery. Plus, one thing I didn't really think a whole lot about before I got it, this one's got 60 volts compared to the single motor Cruiser's 52 volts. So not only does that mean you get more power and higher rotational speed for the motors, but it actually adds battery capacity. You see, watt hours are the true measure of battery capacity. And while both this all-wheel drive and last year's single motor versions have a 30 amp hour battery, you're actually getting 1800 watt hours on the all-wheel drive versus 1560 on the single motor version just due to the higher voltage battery. And this means tit for tat, you're actually getting 15% more range and more battery on the 60 volt version. And you will need it, trust me, because this thing can really rip. Voro Motors does have the dual motor upgrade kit for the single motor version, and it's easy to think, oh, I'll just buy the single motor version scooter and then upgrade it later if I feel like I need it. After all, the difference in price between the single and dual motor versions, $500. The price to upgrade your single motor scooter to the dual motor with the upgrade kit, also $500. But you won't get the extra acceleration punch and slightly longer range that the 60 volt battery in the all-wheel drive scooter will give you. Plus, you'll be missing out on the stiffer stock suspension and fully hydraulic disc brakes compared to the cable actuated brakes on the V2 Cruiser. And the riding experience, honestly, it's addictive. It's one of those scooters that gets me pulling out Google Maps on my phone in the morning just to find fun places to explore so I have an excuse to ride for the day. Now don't get me wrong though, the single motor version 2 Cruiser was a really fun scooter to ride in the same way, but with the punchy acceleration on this all-wheel drive version, I found myself just randomly smiling during rides thinking, okay, how is this an EMOVE Cruiser? And if you've got any experience on the older Gen 1 Cruisers, I think you can imagine what I'm talking about. This thing just has twice the power. The all-wheel drive Cruiser carves beautifully, it's got the wide bars, low center of gravity on stiff springs this time, and it's still got that iconically big deck that lets you shift your weight naturally and really flow with the road. At 22.5 inches long and 8.5 inches wide, it's got a bigger deck than even the Cobble Wolf GTR. To me, the deck puts it in the same class as the InMotion RS as far as stance comfort goes. Honestly, you can ride the thing all day and you won't get cramped. although I did find the suspension a little stiff for me at times. Now let's talk about hills. So with the 60 volt dual motor variant, obviously the hills are no problem. I'm around 180 pounds now all geared up, and this thing will easily clock 30 miles per hour uphill with no drama. It'll still do 35 on flats, which means you get to ride in the road with most cars that don't have bike lanes now, and you won't be that guy that's holding up traffic on a scooter. And downhill, just forget about it. 40 miles per hour, no issue, and it's honestly just approaching dangerous on a scooter with 10 inch by 2.75 inch wide tires. Now Voro claims it'll do 44 miles per hour, which is even more ludicrous, but with my 180 pound geared up body, I was able to get the cruiser to 39 miles per hour on flat ground, max speed full charge, which is actually 42 on the scooter display for what it's worth. Still, if you're moving up in the scooter world from a sub $700 type entry-level scooter, then this all-wheel drive scooter will knock your socks off. And even if you're making a more lateral move from something like the VSET 10 Plus, I still think you'll love the added range, wider bars, tubeless tires, adjustable stem height, and it's got a bigger battery than even the long-range VSET 10 Plus R, and still costs a few $100s less. You gotta love that. This scooter is stupid fast. Stupid fast. Okay, now I'm gonna ramble off some specs for viewers that came here hoping to find one random piece of info. I know that's a lot of you. So the scooter weighs 91 pounds, and that's still under the 100 pound weight limit for heavy class scooters, but it's very much approaching the limit. The battery compartment measures 6.5 inches by 22.5 inches, but on the top deck you actually get a couple more inches of width just because the scooter is sloped on the sides, so 8.5 by 22.5. The suspension is 125 millimeters eye to eye. It's the same on the front and back. It's got unknown spring tension though, but if I had to guess, I'd say 300-ish pounds in the front and 800 in the rear. It's very stiff. It rocks for high-speed carving, but it's not as good as it could be from a comfort standpoint on successive bumps, like if you're off-road or if you're going really fast over a bunch of potholes. It really shines when you're just cruising on it, which is exactly what the scooter's for, right? It's also got one GX16-3 charge port in the front with a 15 amp inline fuse, and the scooter includes one single 2 amp charger. 2 amps. 2 amps. Around 15 or 16 hours of charging time from 0 to 100%. I also confirmed by slicing open the battery on this scooter and the 52 volt one that they both in fact do use LG cells. It's the LG M50 LT cells specifically. And the BMS is called the PGY14S60A0054. I don't know why you would need that, but there it is. That BMS is rated for this pack, and it allows for a 60 amp discharge. It includes short circuit protection and over voltage and overcurrent protections that'll shut off the power to the controller in case of a battery fault. But unfortunately, it's not Bluetooth capable. It's not a smart BMS. For what it's worth though, I think that Bluetooth BMSs with advanced battery monitoring are going to start becoming much more common in scooters soon, because we're already seeing them in almost every new electric unicycle. The tires, like I mentioned before, are 10 inch by 2.75 inch wide hybrid tubeless nylon tires from Zhuangcheng with 5mm tread depth. Sorry if I butchered that name, I did my best. The motors have quick disconnects and are using split rim / motor designs, which makes for really easy tire changes. You just pull the rim off the motor, swap the tire, put it back on, you're done. It's a lot easier than changing tires like we had to before, where you could remove the rim and the motor from the scooter, but you're still tethered to it with the motor wire. Now you can actually take the rim over to a workbench, swap the tire, and put it back on the motor, install it, and you're good to go. The deck to bar height on this scooter is 48.5 inches tall, which is actually the industry's tallest e-scooter handlebar, believe it or not. But seriously though, they are comically tall, and thanks to some new routing for the wires in the front of the handlebars, the all-wheel drive version of the cruiser is actually 2 inches taller than the 46.5 inch tall bars on the standard V2 cruiser. And if you're above 6'5", which is 195 centimeters or taller, I would argue this is the only scooter you should realistically buy. Everything else will feel too small and it'll leave you hunched over reaching for the bars. Not only is that going to result in back pain, but it's just a little more dangerous too. Moving down on the motors, we have 21mm axle bolts, and the all-wheel drive cruiser is actually slightly upgraded here compared to the 19mm rear and 17mm front bolts we found on the single motor version 2. So hopefully that results in a little more strength. You won't shear your axle off, not that I've ever heard of that happening, but it's even harder to do now. The scooter headlight, it's sufficiently bright. It's located near the top of the bars for better light throw, and it runs at the voltage of the scooter actually, between 67 and 52 volts. The light is more of a spotlight than a flood, but at 40 miles per hour, it's still very possible to outrun the light. And the wire for the lights has a quick disconnect plug that's covering 3 pins, where pin 1 is positive, pin 3 is negative, and I assume the middle pin is for a signal wire. It's a decently bright headlight and it'll do for most people, but if you really want to outshine the competition, you can go to pevoutlet.com and get a Firelight, the L2000. That's a light that I helped design and it is amazing for electric scooters. There's a link for that, I'll put it in the description. The controllers inside the deck for this scooter are Voro Motors branded, but they are a very generic looking controller. They're rated for 60 volt nominal batteries with up to 25 amps of output current each for a total of 50 amps output power. The brakes on this thing, they're hydraulics with the hydraulic lines and calipers in the front and rear like I mentioned earlier. And unlike the 52 volt scooter, which would stop on $1.50, you can actually stop this 60 volt cruiser with the hydraulic brakes on a dime. The controllers also provide regenerative braking levels that range from 1 to 5, with 5 being the strongest and very capable of overheating the controller if used by a heavier rider on steep downhills. So I suggest mode 2 or 3 for balance between natural braking feel while still utilizing the regen braking feature. Or you can use 0 mode for aggressive riding. And unplugging the sensor will let you use the throttle and the brakes at the same time, which is perfect for wheelies or burnouts if you're into that. The handlebar width is roughly 27 3/4 inches or 700 millimeters wide, and they're the same bars that you find on the Roadrunner Pro e-bike and the single motor cruiser version 2. The bars are very stable, very wide, and just barely make it through my front door of the house. They're not like the bars on the version 1 EMOVE cruiser that fold down the side of the stem. Alright, now let's talk water resistance. A lot of you are going to be buying this cruiser all-wheel drive for commutes, and those do sometimes happen in the rain. And while Voro Motors will tell you, obviously, not to ride it in the rain, since it's only got IPX6 water resistance rating, I think it's pretty safe to do. As long as you're not actually submerging the scooter body in enormous puddles like I did on my InMotion RS, the cruiser actually holds up pretty well with water. I rode mine around in the rain more than once, and I took it apart a few months later, and I did notice there was some sand and grit inside the battery compartment, which means water got inside, but there are holes in the bottom of the deck that the water can escape from. So the main ingress points are the holes in the side of the scooter where the rear motor wires enter, and also the front where the majority of the cables enter through a hole that's actually sealed with factory silicone. I would say it's like 9 out of 10 water resistance rated, but if you want to go the extra mile, it's really not hard to remove the top deck and just put a thin bead of silicone. I also recommend putting RTV sealant on the 2 holes on the rear of the scooter where the motor wires and the brake lines enter. That way the deck is completely sealed off as best you can do, and if water does get in there, it'll just drain out through the bottom. Now speaking of the scooter deck, I want to talk about the top plate. And I don't know why, but on both the Cruiser version 2 and the all-wheel drive version, Voro Motors decided to use black oxide coated screws. And these particular ones seem to rust very quickly. Granted, the black oxide screws have a bit higher tensile strength than stainless steel, but my top deck screws were showing signs of rusting after just a week, and the rust looks terrible. That happened on both of my EMOVE cruisers, but these screws are not hard to replace with stainless steel ones that have a nice shiny finish. Since these screws aren't even load bearing, I recommend that everyone go out and replace them with stainless steel ones to add some bling factor to the scooter, and you can also prevent them from rusting that way. There are 12 screws on the top of the deck that you can replace. You can expect to pay about 30 cents each, and I use stainless steel 15mm by 6mm flathead socket cap screws. And if you want to get real fancy with it, you can even add some finishing washers like I did here with the color of your choice. Alright, while we're talking about issues that the scooter has, I'll tell you about a few other quirks that I discovered, which I don't think you'll hear mentioned on any other YouTube channel, and they're mostly firmware related actually. The first one is that if you turn the scooter off while it's in single motor mode, then when you turn it back on, it will be stuck in single motor mode, at least until you navigate into the advanced settings and change the AA setting from 1 back to 2. This is a very obvious firmware glitch that I feel like should have been addressed before production, but you won't notice it if you always remember to turn the scooter off while it's in dual motor mode. The second quirk is the throttle jerk. I mentioned this in the video with my 52 volt version, but if you're coasting on the scooter, say downhill around 20 miles per hour, and then you want to give it a little more throttle, the second you start activating the throttle with your thumb, the scooter will e-brake a little bit, and it's actually really annoying, and I imagine it would be quite unnerving for newer riders especially. Like I said, the original version 2 cruiser and this all-wheel drive version have the same problem, but I did figure out a workaround to fix it. So you navigate into the P settings and you find the setting for motor magnets, and this by default is set to 30 from the factory. But I dinked around with it a little bit, and if you change it to 32, then the jerking is completely smoothed out and the power delivery on the low end is much more predictable. I don't know why this is the case or who designed it, but that was my fix for it, and it really does work. The third quirk, I noticed that the P setting for the voltage was still set to 52 volts from the factory on my all-wheel drive cruiser. And this setting will control how accurate the battery gauge on the display is, and should definitely be set to 60 volts. It was clearly an error on the factory part. I did notify Voro though about the problem, and hopefully this factory starts checking that with upcoming batches, but it seems like they were just grabbing displays for the 52 volt and 60 volt cruisers from the same big pile and hooking them up without carefully checking the settings. And lastly, this could be a deal breaker for some people, but the scooter doesn't have usable cruise control yet, or if it does, I can't get it to work. It's supposed to work by holding down the throttle for 5 to 10 seconds in the same position after switching one of the A settings, but with how stiff the suspension is, it's basically impossible for me to hold the throttle in the same position. The bars are just bouncing around too much. Now in general, I've seen people online saying that they like using cruise control. I personally do. I've also seen people saying it's way too dangerous. The fact that it's missing from the scooter might not matter for some people, but it matters for some more than others. I did find it annoying when I was doing longer rides on it. All right, we are really digging into the issues now, but hey, this is why you subscribe to my channel, right? Now the last issue I want to talk about, pretty important. It can be easy to forget when you're punching the throttle on dual motor mode, but you need to remember that this is still a cruiser. It's the EMOVE cruiser. It's meant for long, comfortable cruising and carving. It is not meant for drops, not meant for hard off-road riding or rugged terrain. If you do anything other than cruise, you might end up with a bruise. And you all know me, when I adopt a scooter into my fleet for testing, I push them to every limit that I can. And in the end of my testing with the EMOVE Cruiser all-wheel drive, it failed on drops with a heavier rider. Now much like I recruited Eli in my original EMOVE Cruiser back in 2021, let's meet Eli. This year I recruited my friend Dawson for testing the cruiser all-wheel drive, and he comes in around 250 pounds with all of his gear. The dude has zero hesitation when it comes to riding. He's one of the crazier riders I've ever met. So I handed him the reins of the cruiser all-wheel drive, and I said, here, I'm gonna film you ride it as hard as you want without worrying about breaking it. And so break it he did. He got crazier and crazier on the thing throughout the afternoon until after a handful of solid drops to flat, immediately bottoming out the suspension, the screw that secures the suspension to the rotary headpiece completely sheared off. That's right, the screw head completely busted off and left the cruiser with only one working suspension coil in the front. It's hard to know the limit when you're bottoming out the suspension, and when you do, all the momentum is transferred directly into the bolts on the suspension piece. We were still able to get the scooter back home, and of course as soon as I told Voro about it, they replied to my email complaining with an order number for a replacement part, so that wasn't a big deal. But still, if you were on a long ride, it could be a very expensive Uber ride home, and would probably put your scooter out of commission for at least a week. Despite the added power, this scooter is still just for cruising and carving. Don't get too crazy with it, especially if you're a 200+ pound rider, unless of course you want to spend 120 bucks upgrading the front suspension with the AO6 air shocks. You can pump those so full of air that they basically don't compress at all unless you're doing drops to flat, which will help reduce the sudden blow to the screws and suspension mounts. You can check out the suspension upgrade video I linked earlier, or I'll put it down in the description too if you want to click on it and watch how to upgrade your suspension. Alright, that's it. I'm done. I'm done ragging on the thing. I know it sounded bad, but gotta lay out the bad with the good. That's why you guys subscribe to Ginger on Wheels, right? I keep it real. Anyway, let's talk about some of the things I really like now, because I want to kind of Oreo this video together with the chocolatey goodness on either end. First of all, you get the incredible handling. That's like one of my favorite parts about the V2. It's gotta be the tightest handling scooter of anyone I've ever tested, ever. I'm not just saying that. I think it has something to do with the really rigid frame and the wide bars. Plus the center of gravity on it just feels lower. You can get lower on the bars and tighter in the corners than you normally would. And even if you're a new rider, I would argue that you're not gonna get speed wobbles. You won't even think about speed wobbles. I'm used to riding scooters that are like 100 pounds at least, the big InMotion RS and the Cabo GTR. This is the best way I know how to describe what riding the Cruiser V2 is like, the all-wheel drive. Imagine you're walking around all day with a backpack that's 50 pounds, and then you have shoes on made of concrete. That's what riding scooters is kind of normally like, and I'm used to it. But then when I got on the EMOVE Cruiser all-wheel drive, it has so much power. It just feels like I took all that stuff off and I was floating around. You know what I mean? If you're underwater running and then you get out of the water, you just feel lighter. You're not any lighter, but you just feel like you are, and it feels so much more fun than a normal big ass scooter. But anyway, that's what the Cruiser feels like to me. Probably the reason why you're looking at it. One of the major obvious benefits to this thing is the price. It's $18.50 from Voro Motors, and you can cut out even more of the cost if you use the Ginger7 coupon code when you buy it. And subscribing to the channel too, even if you're not shopping for a scooter. Just thanks for being here. Anyway, the price. You're not gonna beat the price to performance ratio on this thing. And if you do, it'll be something that's a lot jankier. The solid feel of this thing combined with the power and the extra big battery, name brand battery, pretty much impossible to beat right now. I also really like how water resistant the thing is. Aside from those bolts that can rust on top, which is like a 5-minute fix, the switches and the display on the handlebars all look really well sealed. The plastics on the bottom are all molded, so water really can't get in unless it's being sprayed up from the bottom, which is really unlikely if you're riding the scooter. Inside the deck, all the components are pretty watertight. Everything's heat shrink and covered in silicone inside the deck there, if water can get in at all, because it does have that rubber seal around the top of the deck plate. It's also got sealant around the ports where the wires go in and out of the deck, so I'm not gonna say you could ride it in the rain easily, but I rode mine in the rain a couple times. I had no issues. Even though the scooter is great, I feel like I wouldn't be doing my job as a YouTuber if I didn't push them to make it better. So here are a couple things that I hope Voro can upgrade or change in the second version of the all-wheel drive cruiser. For starters, it'd be really cool if we got some high discharge cells. Like the LG cells are an awesome start, but if we got Samsung 50S cells, that way you could pin the throttle all day and it wouldn't even stress the battery cells at all. You can also charge them much faster. We could probably charge that at like 15 amps, no problem. Also, I do appreciate that they upgraded the suspension, which was terrible, and now this is a little bit too tight. It's a little bouncy when you're just cruising on it, and if you're doing any sort of drops, it just transfers that shock right into the scooter frame. But if we got some nice suspension scooter, that would be amazing. I know it will cost a bit more. I don't know how much people are willing to pay. I know I personally would be willing to pay another $100 on MSRP for good suspension, spring and hydraulic suspension with adjustable damping or something like that. The suspension travel only allows for like 20 millimeters of travel on the front and back, so you're not really working with a lot, but if you can dampen it on both ends, it would be a lot more enjoyable. One last thing, I feel like this was just a huge oversight on Voro's part, but go through the settings on the scooter and properly match them to the scooter. I'm sure that Voro would have liked to know that their scooter was set to 52 volts before they sent it to me, but it's a 60 volt scooter. It takes 2 minutes to go through the settings. They have the sheet that they mail you in the box that goes over all the quality assurance things that they checked before they mailed the scooter, and I'm blown away that that wasn't one of the things, to make sure that the voltage of the display matches the voltage of the scooter, and also that the motor poles are accurate. I can't confirm that this is a widespread issue, but I did confirm it with 2 other people that I don't know if it's actually a 32 magnet motor or what, but it would be nice if they tried to optimize the settings. But overall, objectively, I want to give this EMOVE Cruiser all-wheel drive an 8 out of 10 in the scooter universe. Mostly just because of the value. Granted, there are much better and faster scooters by now, but you're not going to beat the range, you're not going to beat the sturdy stem and like just the solid scooter feel that you got, plus a 30 amp hour battery, and it's under $2,000. You got the Voro support. Like, Voro has got a live chat feature on their website. They have a phone number that you can actually call and talk to somebody, and they also have email. They're pretty responsive over email. Anyway, 8 out of 10 for this Voro Motors all-wheel drive cruiser. If you know me, I think a 10 might be darn near impossible to get for any scooter. A 9 maybe would be understandable for this thing, but it has those quirks in the display, and I think Voro could have easily ironed those out before they went full-blown production with this thing. But yeah, this thing just ticks off all the boxes for me. It ticks them off with quality solutions and components to things that are normal, common issues on other scooters in the same price range. You get the US-based customer support, 30 amp hour name brand LG battery, dual hydraulic brakes, removable rims for like good tire changes, easy tire changes. It's got a decent headlight, it's got turn signals, horn, dual motors. Controllers won't hesitate to absolutely rob the battery of power when you ask them to. It's just a really well thought out scooter. It's a comfortable design, mostly water resistant, and you got like 3 to 5 day shipping in the US. It's a pretty much impossible package to beat right now. When you add it all together, it just smokes the competition, and I can say with a fair degree of certainty that anyone who buys the all-wheel drive EMOVE Cruiser will not be disappointed. You're not gonna get it and say, darn, I wish it went faster, or it's not fun enough. You're gonna have a great time. But even if you don't feel like buying this scooter, go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube channel, because I have an absolute abomination of a scooter I want to show you, and I'm going to put it out for the 50,000 subscriber special episode, hopefully coming out soon. We're so close, you guys, so please subscribe. But thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.